Hi, and welcome to New Earth Era, the podcast. My name is Julie, and today I'm going to talk to a very special guest, Ariana Fotinakis. Ariana is a coach, a breathwork facilitator, and a founder of the 5D Business Collective. She uses a holistic approach when supporting her clients by blending science, spirit, and soul. And Ariana has been supporting wellness entrepreneurs with their personal and professional growth since 2017. And she believes that the key components to growing a successful business are community, collaboration, and a deep connection to the self. Welcome, Ariana. Ready?
Yes.
Yes. So I was wondering if you could start to share a little bit about how you got into spirituality. Did you go through an awakening, or is it something that was sort of always in your life, or how was your awakening process?
Great question. And I will try to be as brief as possible because I feel like that could be a very long and convoluted answer. But spirituality has been a big part of my life for most of my life. As a child, I was very intuitive. I was very connected to nature and animals. And my mom also is deeply spiritual as well. So when her friend would come over and bring her crystals, I remember loving playing with her rocks. And when my mom would burn sage, I have just some really, really strong memories of those smells in our home. But as is very common with children and moving into adolescence, we learn to suppress those parts of ourselves, right? It's weird if you want to talk to trees or play with animals and things like that. And so I learned from quite a young age to hide a lot of the really true to me parts.
Yeah.
And a really easy way for me to suppress that and suppress my sensitivities was through using substances. So alcohol and drugs. I started drinking at a very young age. And that continued for 10 years. I had a really, really unhealthy relationship with alcohol, experimented with a lot of different substances.
Yeah.
And, when you're deep in addiction, you become very disconnected from yourself. You become disconnected to those things that are greater than you, those unseen forces. And when I was 23, I had a moment, and I was really fortunate that I didn't have a typical rock bottom moment that one might have in addiction. But I woke up one morning and I actually looked at myself in the mirror. I hadn't really looked at myself and seen myself in a really long time.
Yeah.
And when I saw the girl looking back at me, I didn't recognize her. I felt like there was no life in her eyes. I was 15 pounds heavier, which isn't a lot, but I'm 5'1". So it's a lot on a little body. And I didn't know this person looking at me.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I needed to make a change in my life, and I knew I needed to stop drinking. So I turned to things like physical activity. So I got really into working out, running, going to spin classes, and those kind of became like moving meditations for me. They were ways to begin to reconnect to myself and my body, and to cultivate confidence in myself again, which is something that I had lost for so many years. And it's been interesting to witness kind of the movement through my four bodies. I speak a lot about our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. And so my journey really started as a physical one. And then I started moving more into the mindset work, doing journaling and affirmations and positive self-talk, which then led me down more into the route of spirituality. So starting to then connect to my intuition to see if I could connect to either forms of guidance. I loved using cards and really allowing my life to become more intuitively led, both from just a day-to-day standpoint, but also within my business. And I'm so grateful for that now, because I can't imagine living life from my mind and thinking that I'm in control all the time.
Exactly. That's sort of of course, it's different things that is sort of the challenge we struggle with. But I think most of us sort of end up at this crossroad where it's what am I doing? Where am I going now? Right. And we need to really look at ourselves, like you're saying, and that feeling you described when you were a child. And I resonate with that so much. I was also talking to trees, right? And sort of like realizing that everything is alive, right? That's a part of it for me as well. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if, well, for me, I mean, I was a business student when I had my awakening, and I'm still very passionate about like business models and entrepreneurship. But now I feel like I'm passionate in a different way. It's more like I want to know, how can we do this in alignment with truth, or with who we really are, right? And you are working on sales and marketing in this new paradigm that is happening. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what that means and how it's related to the expansion of consciousness on Earth.
Yeah, definitely. So there's quite a few things that I could say to this. And there are two principles that I really keep in mind. It's this idea of regeneration versus extraction. And so up to this point, a lot of our common business practices have been extractive in nature. We have larger corporations who are working to increase their profits at all costs. Yeah. So let's destroy the environment so that we can make things in a more cost-effective way, or so that we can deliver things more quickly, like Amazon and all of the stuff, right? But even beyond from a natural resource standpoint, we're extracting from, or we are being taught to extract from the market as much as possible. So see how much money we can get. Again, like this idea of increasing our revenues to points far beyond what we would ever need. And then also the ways in which we are taught to go about building and running our businesses, especially within the world of entrepreneurship. They're extractive from our own energy systems. Yes. So we're taught to hustle and to show up every single day and to grind, and that consistency is what's going to get you to the end. And there is truth to that, right? You know, I also think sometimes within the spiritual world, we can be swung too far the other side and be led to believe that you just need to sit back and manifest your business. Like, we do have to work, but we can do so in ways that are conscious of the planet, that are conscious of the individuals we're marketing ourselves to, and that are conscious of ourselves. So when we're not operating then in this extractive way, we're looking, okay, how can I run my business in a way that supports the environment? So are there maybe organizations that are doing really important work that I can contribute some of my profits to? Are there simple practices? Can I choose to source products locally if I have a product-based business? Can I be conscious of the types of packaging that I use? When I'm marketing myself, can I not try to trigger people to invest in working with me from a place of fear? That's a really common thing. We're taught to trigger the pain points and to trigger the wounds. And essentially we're taught to market to like the root chakra. But what I'm more interested in is, how can I guide somebody to make a decision about whether this investment is right for them or not, and to then invest from a place of excitement. So market to the heart chakra from a place of inspiration. And then of course, when we are going about our business activities, like, how can I be consistent and how can I continue to show up for the long term, but how can I do so in a way that is honoring of my own unique energy?
That's a huge one. Definitely. Yeah. It's all this, like, we're trying to sort of extract or exploit the system instead of realizing that we are a part of an ecosystem as well, right? So it's a huge paradigm, and it's so important. What you're saying about like your own energy as well in this. It's like you're serving, but you're not necessarily you're not giving you're not selfish or selfless. It's a balance between like the integrated part, right? If you understand what I mean. So yeah,
100%. And, you know, I work with a lot of like spiritual healers, coaches, wellness practitioners, and we can't effectively show up for our clients when we are burning ourselves out. You know, when we're not taking time to engage in our own practices, and when we're allowing our nervous systems to become dysregulated, we can't hold the space for the big things that our clients might be coming to us with. And so, yes, we need to do these things for ourselves first and foremost. But if we do want to be of service to a greater mission, we need to take care of ourselves. We can't do it from an empty state.
Yeah. And that's a huge, like for me, especially in my entrepreneurial journey, it's like, I sort of like saw that as either or. Either you like are service yourself in that negative sense, or you are service to others. And it's actually, we are all one. So it's service to everyone, right? So it's a different kind of, yeah, definitely. That's beautiful. And is there something that, if you want to share, like something that, special ways you can sort of like take care of yourself and not burn yourself out in this sort of healing and in this sort of kind of mission that we're doing?
Yeah, definitely. So some kind of general recommendations is like, use the tools that you help your clients with, right? So if there are certain practices or modalities that you use with your clients, you're probably using them because you believe in them, and you're probably using them because they work. So what needs to happen for you to create the time and space for you to use those practices for yourself? Does it look like having more solid boundaries around maybe not taking clients before 10 a.m. so that you have time for yourself in the morning? Does it look like being discerning around how many things you commit to? So I am super guilty of this. I get really excited and I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do that. And then you realize you're like, oh, maybe I actually didn't have capacity for that. So really learning to check yourself before you take on commitments. And I'll speak from my own personal experience now too. Like, I'm a new mom, so I have a 9-month-old baby, and it is a completely different world trying to navigate being a mom and being an entrepreneur, and then also taking care of myself. And so what I look for myself is like, I take the lens of the minimum effective dose. Like, what's the smallest amount of work that I can do that will give me the greatest benefit? And so for me, that looks like 20 minutes of a combination of like some breath work and some mantra or chanting, and then a little bit of movement, whether it's some stretching or just like a few activating movements to get my energy going. And that has me feeling really good and connected. It's a big difference from the 3 hours I used to take in the mornings, but it worked.
It's also like that. If you have too much, it can be this huge barrier to even get started. And it feels like, it's better to start simple and find your own. Yeah, definitely. That resonates with me as well. Sure.
Yeah. I used to be a personal trainer. It's how I started my business. And I did that for 7 years. And a lot of my work was like helping my clients. What's something so small and so easy, it's laughable that you could do it. So I would say, like, can you drink an extra glass of water? Yeah, I can. Okay, amazing. Like, let's commit to that. Drink an extra glass of water every single day. And it seems small, and that action on its own won't make a huge difference, but it's the momentum that starts to create, and that belief in self. Just like when I first got sober and I started going to the gym and trying new classes, it was setting an intention and following through on that intention that gave me that confidence and gave me the ability to say, okay, cool, what else can I try doing now?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you have to start somewhere, and somewhere that it's doable right now, right? So not become too ambitious, and then you just end up just not doing anything, right? That's a trap that I've been falling, that I'm guilty of in my life, for sure.
It's totally understandable. I'm guilty of the same. And we see people on social media, right? And it's like, oh, okay, cool. I'll just do what they're doing because I'm inspired by them. But we don't know what kind of support they have in their life. We don't know how long they've been doing it for, even when we're comparing our businesses to theirs, right? Like, we don't know the whole picture outside of what we're seeing on social media.
Yeah, that's interesting what you're saying about the comparison, and how, like, do you feel like that's also part of this paradigm shift, that moving away from comparison and maybe like seeing this in a different way?
Yeah, I do think that comparison is kind of within our human nature. Our brains, they want to know where things fit, and they want to categorize. And that's why we have this tendency to judge, and judgment in and of itself is not a bad thing. A judgment is simply just having a perception or a belief about something. But what I specifically see within this new paradigm is moving away from this idea of like competition. So maybe there's like a little bit of comparison. Ideally, I would love for us to fully move away from that and to be so rooted in our own sense of self that we can witness what someone else is doing and appreciate their differences, or however, quote unquote, far along they are on the path or anything like that. But what I'm really feeling the call for is for all of us to work together. And it doesn't matter if someone does or is doing or saying the exact things that you want to do and say. Mm-hmm. Again, when we look at our unique energetic makeup,
that's the thing.
Someone will resonate with you and someone will resonate with them.
Yes.
There's room for everybody here. And so I think maybe even if comparison doesn't go away, there's at least still a sense of trust that it's okay if that person's in that position, because I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And I know the folks who are meant to work with me will find me.
Exactly. Yeah. And sort of like, yeah, as you're saying, like the trust in that, and also like that realization that we are all one, right? So it's like, if other people's success is your success as well, and seeing that more as an inspiration and what is possible, instead of something that is taken away from you, right? Even though that's the mind, the nature of the mind that you're saying as well. So it's sort of like understand it, but also sort of learning to manage it in a different way as well. So yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe as we continue to evolve, that part of the brain will go away. But I think that's the beauty of our existence, right? Is like we can fall into kind of some of these egoic habits and patterns, and we can learn to step away from that and to be the observer and to witness ourselves engaging in those patterns, have compassion for ourselves and our humanness, and then choose to operate from that higher perspective.
Definitely. Yeah. That's the real journey, right? That's beautiful. Yeah. And you're also speaking about trauma within the world of entrepreneurship. And I would love to hear more about that, especially since I'm also a conscious entrepreneur and I'm encountering all these blockages or beliefs and stuff like that on my journey.
Yeah, definitely. So I think what I'll start by saying, when I'm referring to trauma, there's a lot of different ways that people will define it. And I love what Dr. Gabor Mate says about trauma. And he says that trauma is less about what happened to you and more about how your body responds to it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And it's important to keep this in mind, because what we often find is that, with a lot of my clients, I'll have people come to me and they'll say, I shouldn't be acting this way. I shouldn't be having these blocks. I shouldn't be getting triggered like this. When we dive a little bit deeper, they're like, I had a good upbringing. I had a stable childhood. I didn't have anything bad happen to me. So why am I responding in this way? And when we look at trauma through the lens of how our body responds and less about what happened, we realize that something as simple as getting lost in a grocery store when you're a little kid, or, like for me, being made fun of when I used to enjoy sharing my writing with the class. Those things, our little bodies can go into shutdown mode. And then, of course, we do have bigger experiences that many individuals have experienced that we would all agree, like, oh yeah, that's traumatic, right? Like the big teachers. And so what we have is we have an entire society. So we have our entrepreneurs, we have the people we're marketing ourselves to. We're all really just acting out from our traumas at different levels. And what my intention is for entrepreneurs, specifically within like the spiritual, the conscious, and the wellness spaces, is to understand how their own traumas are influencing their experiences as entrepreneurs. So these things that we label as limiting beliefs and blocks, and we think we just need to do more mindset work, or we just need to let go of these beliefs. Like sometimes we actually have to work with our physiology and our bodies in order to move through these things, rather than just like journal them away. Because I tried that for years and I used to get really frustrated thinking like, what's wrong with me? This mindset coach says all I need to do is write out this affirmation 20 times a day and I should be fine.
It's deeper. It's so rooted within us, and it's emotional. So what I've found is that on some things you can sort of like change the mindset at this very surface level when you are embodying a truth and you feel that reality so strongly, and then you need to get into your body, as you're saying. That's actually interesting that you're saying, because there's something that I've been trying to point out about this, and that it's really hard to see what is it, why is it not that simple as for some people it is? And it's because in this situation I have a deeper, like it's in my body in a deeper way, and it requires a deeper work in a way, you can say. So yeah, that's beautiful to make that distinction.
Definitely. And there's so many layers to work with, right? Like we have our own experiences, and epigenetics has shown us that like ancestral and trauma and generational trauma, that all impacts us as well. If you believe in past lives and the things that you can be carrying from there. So there's so many things that we are navigating, and something that I really see within the world of like within the healing arts is fears around being seen and fears around accepting money in exchange for our services.
Yeah.
And if we look back hundreds of years, there was a time where it wasn't safe to be a healer, where, the witch burnings, and within my own community, like I'm First Nations, and medicine people were revered in community. But then when settlers came over, that was like witchcraft, and that was evil. So being seen and showing up and really sharing our intuitive gifts and our healing abilities, there's a lot to unpack there. And then same thing on the financial front too, right? Like we were never paid financially for our healing services. People would take care of us. They would maybe give us some bread or like give us a chicken or something. And now we're here and we have to attach a financial amount to this life-changing work that we do. It's like, how do I do that?
Yeah, definitely. And also this like trauma in relation to this. I don't know how things are in Canada, but in Europe, I think, and in Norway, it is this trauma of sort of like figures or institutions in the name of spirituality exploiting people for money in a way also that has been sort of like, for example, in the 500 years ago, people were sort of like paying to church to get rid of their sin, right? So there's this trauma of receiving money for spirituality. There is at least something in me that I recognize that is, whoa, this is something that I'm very afraid of being on the bad side of this as well. There's this very deeply rooted fear of being exploited and exploit as well. And you really need to have your integrity in what you're doing, right? So it's something, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you bring that up. Because even like from the exploiter standpoint, right? Like when we have that in our lineage, and I say for myself too, like I'm half First Nations and I'm half Greek. So I come from both like a colonized community and a colonizer community. And when we carry the lineage of people who have done the exploiting, whether it's of resources or humans or whatever it may be, that's really a call for us to find compassion for ourselves and for those in our lives. And people sometimes get triggered when I use that term, but finding compassion for folks who have done the exploiting, because how sad to be so disconnected from your true nature as a human being, right?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. That's how we transform that energy, with compassion. There's no other way, right? So we have to, if we can't face that, who will, right? So yeah, that's really beautiful. Yeah. Okay. And you're also passionate about harmonizing the masculine and feminine energies in entrepreneurship. And I guess this is something that more and more people seem to become more aware of in general. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what is that in your experience?
Yeah, totally. So first thing I'll start off by saying is that when it comes to like masculine and feminine energies, has absolutely nothing to do with gender spectrum, anything like that. Like we all have it regardless of how we identify. Yeah. And what we are moving from is like, up to this point, we've been in a society that is like very masculine energy dominant. So the masculine is very much about the doing, the action taking. This could be where some of like the more like hustle grind mentality within business and entrepreneurship comes from. The masculine is really about taking the action. It's like getting out there and doing the thing. Yeah. Whereas the feminine energy this is our more intuitive, our creative energy, the nurture, the mother. Again, doesn't matter like where you fall in the gender spectrum, like we all have those archetypes within us.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have experienced both within my own life and what I see in most of my clients is that we were operating so heavily in the masculine, especially when you start your business. You know, there's so many things to do. You wear all of the hats in your business, and it's really easy to be in that go, 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 go state. And then we reach a point where it's too much. Our nervous systems are shot. We're burned out. We're not feeling creative. We're feeling disconnected from our intuition. And so then we go really far over to the other side and we go really into the feminine. And that is kind of like the shadow side of our spiritual realm of business, where we sometimes think that if we're in alignment, things will just happen for us.
Yeah.
And that if we manifest, or if we meditate, and if we like do all of the practices, we maybe don't have to do as much of the like outward actions in our business.
Definitely.
And so when we find this harmony, I use the word harmony instead of balance, because balance assumes that there is like an equal of both.
Mm-hmm.
And when we harmonize the masculine and the feminine, we understand that sometimes there are seasons within business where we do need to be doing more. Yeah. We might be a little bit tired. We might have to do some things we don't want to do. And that's a really important part of our growth, is to learn that we are capable of doing hard things, and that there's good growth that comes from doing stuff you don't always want to do.
Yeah.
And then so to know when it's that season, and then to know when we're in the season where there's maybe less outward action, where we need to reflect and we need to recalibrate and allow that guidance to come through. Exactly. Yeah. And so that we know that when we are taking the action, we're doing that from a space of authenticity and from a space that is of highest purpose within our businesses and to our communities. Because if we're just going all the time, we miss those intuitive hits, and we don't listen to what our business is actually wanting from us. But then on the other side, if we're just always listening and we're not actually doing anything, then nothing will come into manifest.
Exactly. This is balance. And I recognize all of it for sure. And I was also in this really like hustling performer state before I had my awakening, and I found myself on the completely other side. I was afraid of doing something because I was afraid of getting back into that, so I had to sort of balancing my solar plexus and seeing that action. You can take action without the stress in it, you can take action without. I feel like it could be when you wake up, you can be very in your upper chakras as well, and we need to ground the energy. And that's also part of taking action, I think, if that resonates with you as well.
Yeah, 100%. And if we take it like even kind of more to the surface, I suppose, from the body perspective, right? For some, the act of hustling and like working, like for me, it was like 17 hours a day for years and years and years. And that can be traumatic on the body. Even if it's not traumatic, what it is doing to our nervous systems is putting us into a state of deep dysregulation. Yeah. And so that fear of doing anything because we don't want to go back there, it's a very natural response. And so sometimes it's even more simple than like when we learn to work with our physiology and work with our nervous systems, practices just as simple as taking a moment and like scanning your environment and like looking behind you, like letting your nervous system know that there's actually no danger. That's a really, really great practice. Learning, like I love to just take time in the morning to like feel my arms, feel my body, like trace the outline of my body so that I know where my body begins and ends and where the world begins and ends. And these things seem really simple and like they aren't actually connected to all of these broader things. But what they do is they increase the capacity of our nervous systems to handle stress. So it allows us to begin to take some actions again and to put ourselves in those situations, and for our bodies to trust, like not even from the mind standpoint, but from the body to be like, oh, okay, I see that Julie's doing some things again. And I trust in my ability to hold her while she's taking these actions.
working with your body, not sort of like against it in a way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is so counterintuitive to what we have been taught.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's beautiful. And there is this sort of like the rise in the feminine energy on the planet as well, right? That is sort of helping us to balance that overly masculine entrepreneurship and sort of coming into not being too to label it feminine, right? Energy, the receiver mode, like to only be there, but sort of those are getting into balance. That's what's happening now, isn't it? Like in general. Yeah.
Definitely. I think 2012 was a big moment in time for that, but I think there's another date, and I can't remember if it's like 78 or 80 something, but there was another big moment within like the Mayan calendar where they were sharing that there was like kind of the catalyst for this shift starting to happen. And we've been in a very patriarchal society up to this point, and I don't believe we're moving into a matriarchal society, but there's this concept of it's not moving to a place where we're like just run by the feminine and where like women become the heads of households and things like that. But it's really an act of returning to the mother. And I look at this as returning to the earth mother and our connection with her, and ultimately our connection with one another as children of our earth mother.
Exactly. And also that bringing that nurture, that compassion into our business that is sort of lacking the heart space, right? As you were talking about in the beginning as well. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So the way I found you was through the 5D Business Collective, and I think that sounds really, really cool. And I was wondering if you could share more about that mission.
Yeah, definitely. So it's actually really funny that you asked me to share the mission, because I'm going to be fully transparent right now that I'm in an interesting space with the 5D Business Collective. Okay. So it is actually a company that's been around since 2016. And previously we used to be called Entrepreneurs in Health and Fitness. And we were a community for like personal trainers, nutritionists, yoga teachers, body workers, things like that. And we ran in-person events, giving folks an opportunity to connect with other entrepreneurs who worked in wellness and who understood what it was like to be an entrepreneur within that world, but where we would also teach them the practical business skills. And as I deepened into my own spiritual journey, I started to realize that we were talking about business from a really surface level lens. And we were attracting people who were wanting to help people from a very surface level lens. So it was a lot of like fitness and nutrition and stuff. And in 2020, it became really clear to me that like, even though I'd been trying to change the messaging and everything, like I needed to do like a hard pivot. Like I needed to let entrepreneurs in health and fitness go, and I needed to have something new come up. And so my process of birthing the 5D Business Collective, it was a very intuitively guided process. I spent a lot of months in meditation. I would do card pulls. I would go out in nature. I would ask the trees. I would ask the ocean. I would just allow myself to be fully led into what wanted to come through. And so the 5D Business Collective was what wanted to come through. And we relaunched in October of 2020. And even at that point, my intention was, we're just going to run some online events now and then. Again, like with 2020, it was not super easy to do in-person stuff, just with how the world was. So I was like, whatever I'll do, I'll do some online events now and then. We'll have our Instagram, and that will be that. And the day before we launched, this download came through, and it was like, no, you need to create like a bigger container for people. Like you need to create more experience for them. You need to create more opportunities to gather. So I made our membership like the night before we launched. And when we had our launch party and we had a lot of practitioners come together to share like breathwork and meditation and things like that, I also announced that we're going to be starting this membership community where each month we will have events, we'll have a resource library of business development education, and we're going to support you in building not only your business, but also building yourself as the human being behind the business. So we've been doing that for about 18 months now. And It's really beautiful. We have a great community. We have events pretty much every single week in our membership community. And I'm in a space now where I think it's time for me to like deepen into that mission more. I'm needing to kind of retreat again a little bit and to reconnect back to what's wanting to come through the business. What I'm intuitively feeling is coming through is I really want to create a space where entrepreneurs who would maybe identify as like healers and people who would maybe not go to like traditional investors or to like apply at banks for funding for their businesses because those processes are so off-putting. Yeah. I want to create a space where we provide access for that.
Like a crowdfunding space kind of.
Yeah, essentially. And I don't fully know what that looks like, but that's what I'm feeling is like our next evolution is like where you can come and you can learn about business. You can learn about how to make a business plan and to do these things in a way that's not intimidating and not in language that's meant to kind of push you away. Yes. And where we also have investors and folks who really want to inject cash into these businesses who want to do really amazing things and where we can connect them and to make that a possibility.
Yeah. So it's like a mix of both funding and acceleration or accelerators. That's the word. And this learning platform as well for entrepreneurs. I think that's a huge, beautiful mission because so many people are like just the last years. I think they're really becoming more and more aware. I think it's like, especially since 2020, I think it's been a really becoming so much awareness around this, the way we do business and the way we have our careers, right? And where we invest our money. And as people become more and more conscious of this, they just try to look for solutions. They want to know, am I the only one thinking that something is off, something is wrong? Am I the only one doing this, right? So I think that's a beautiful mission. And I think it's really, what the world needs right now, amongst other things as well. But that's a huge one because like to understand like the business models of the new earth, if you want to call it that, it's so fundamental for like we need some structure and system to sort of share and help and serve, right? And especially since we're living still in this physical structure reality as well. So yeah, that's beautiful.
Definitely. Yeah. And like I see so many businesses and like there's no judgment, but like we look at like the tech industry, right? And like how much money gets funneled into making more tech platforms and all of these things. And then there's these healers who have these beautiful gifts that can change the lives of so many people. And they're like bootstrapping it. They're going into debt, trying to start things for themselves. They don't realize that there is a world of funding available to them. And even if they do go, like last year, I didn't go on a huge kick, but I was like applying for different grants and loans and things like that. And I have kind of like a stubborn perspective. So I'm like, okay, cool. If I encounter this thing and I don't know what it means, I'm going to go look for it. And I had someone who said that they were giving grants, then tell me that they were going to give me a really high interest loan instead. And I argued and I was like, no, like it says right here, this is what I'm eligible for. Yeah. But I know that not a lot of people would go that far. Exactly. And so I want to provide these places for folks who have really been left out of the entrepreneurial conversation.
Yeah. That has really something to offer because what is entrepreneurship or the business world all about? I guess it's supposed to be us serving each other, right? An energy exchange of different things and in terms of goods and services in a way. So it's everyone has something that they can share, right? So it's beautiful that we can invite more people, not only the stereotype, right?
Totally. So, to be determined on that. That's, I think, what's coming next for 5D Business Collective. But in the meantime, each month we do like peer coaching sessions. I lead embodiment sessions to help folks come into that really like deeply connected space so that when they are taking action from their business, they can do so. We bring astrology circles in. We do workshops each month. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening in version 1.0 still.
Definitely. How can people join the business collective? Is it like an application, or is it an open, or how?
Yeah, it's open all the time. We want to make ourselves available to folks. So if you go to 5dbusiness.co/the collective, and I don't know if you do show notes, but I can maybe share that link with you. It's easy. It's $33 a month Canadian. I really want to make it accessible and just like over deliver the heck out of things.
Yeah, beautiful. That's amazing. All right. So I'm going to make sure to link where they can find you, where everyone can find you, in both the YouTube and on in the email that I'm going to be sending out and everything. And I was wondering if you wanted to share anything more, or is it something on your heart that you feel intuitively guided to share?
Good question. Yeah, I think what's coming through is just, I really want to hone in this theme that we've been talking about here, this intersection between self and business. And our businesses in this new paradigm, they are an extension of ourselves.
Yes.
And everything that we do for ourselves, whether it is something that regenerates us or something that extracts from us, it impacts that business that is that extension of ourselves, and then ultimately impacts the broader community that business is a part of.
Yes.
And so we can look at this in maybe a negative way, and that like, oh, if I don't take care of myself, then like my business isn't going to flourish, my community is not going to flourish. But when we look at it from the other standpoint, when I deeply nourish myself, when I take space for rest and play and joy and pleasure and allowing all of the earthly things that I came here to experience, my business can only flourish as a result of that. And my community can only flourish as a result of that. So I really want to just offer the invitation for listeners today to like, find like, what is something that allows you to tap into your joy and your playfulness? Yeah. And can you bring that into your weekly to-dos, just as you would with creating content or connecting with people or writing emails? Because that is going to be just as important part of your process as the other more traditional business things.
Definitely. That's what it's about, like finding the joy in what we're doing. Because if we're not doing that, then what are we doing, right? Yeah. It was so amazing to have you on. I just had to say that. I love your energy. I love, this conversation is really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. It was my pleasure. Super grateful.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was super fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for showing up, and have a beautiful day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you so much. Bye.